this question is important is we'll find when we look at the Keynesian model. Is it on? Yeah. All right. That the liquidity effect is something that we've observed in this thing. It is indeed here, as is rightfully shown. And for a long time, with models that had optimizing behavior by agents, it disappeared. Right? So that's one of the reasons why with the new Keynesian model, the liquidity effect was back. Something that we see in the data and that we understand intuitively from ISLM. Right? The whole idea is expansionary monetary policy means more money supply goes up, nominal interest rates go down, and output goes up. That's when we think of what an expansionary monetary policy action should do, it should be that. Right? And the fact that it was gone for quite a while with many models was very upsetting. Yeah? So we wanted to see here whether it's there in ISLM, and indeed it is. Yeah? Right? So so here you have it. So M goes up, I goes down, R goes down, Y goes up. Right? So with sticky prices in the short run, right, then I going down means that R goes down. We got that right here from the Fisher equation too, right? If the price is constant, then pi is 0, inflation is 0, and R and I are the same thing. Gesundheit. That's the great thing about one, Germany, and two, the influence of immigrants. My president. So in America, we can say two things when someone sneezes. We can say a religious thing, God bless you. If you don't want to be religious, you can use the German. Gesundheit is perfectly fine English in America, right? Thanks to the influence of immigration and the German language that they brought to us. Yeah? All right, so that part we get right from the Fisher equation with the sticky prices. All right, and then, so monetary policy shock, M goes up, shifts real money supply to the right, which is going to shift the LM curve down. And indeed, we have then interest rates go down with M going up and outputs increasing. Right, so matches the observed liquidity effect. So absolutely correct. We could be pedantic or a little more careful and notice that there's one thing that we could improve in this picture, right? And that's Y has increased from here. So the money demand also changes. And so it's the order and how you make it self-consistent. Right? So I would start by saying, I would start really with this drawing, just like you did. Right? You get the first, right? Think of the direct effect, the initial effect, and that's indeed that interest rate goes down and output goes up. And now I would go back and say, well, wait a second. If output goes up, this means that money demand must have shifted. No? Right? So I would add in this, for example, and now I know that the money supply actually must have increased even further. Right? And 1 prime over P, right, such that at Y1, right, with the shifted, right, as our transactions go up, our demand for money goes up too, right? And then now we have the completely fully self-consistent approach here, right? And you'll find, so especially when you saw some of the pictures when I started to move lots of things, it gets really confusing because to make these things completely self-consistent graphically can become very problematic. So what you explained was absolutely correct. This is just, you can add like in English would say the icing on the cake. You know? One more step. The cake was already delicious, fantastic cake. I loved it. Right? We could just add some sprinkles to it and do that. So we have, right, the money supply ended up increasing just a little bit. Right, more or yeah. Right. Okay. National Reserve of Fiduciary requirement. Now, then you address the second part here. Hence, money supply innovations are important and account for a large proportion of output fluctuations. So I wanted this just to be a statement, so of course it's correct. We see now that money changing, right, explains variations, or at least part of the variations in output, right? You had a different idea, and I like that. You know? So this is also, I'm not sure, I know not all of my colleagues are like this, and everyone's like this, but this is an answer that I didn't expect, right? And that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing, you know? Because I think your answer is a good answer. You know? So it's not what right? So there's not always one single right answer, right? And that's what I tried to emphasize in the first lecture. It's a suite of models, it's a way of thinking. There's not always one right answer. So you argued it does not imply that money supply innovations explain a large share of the business cycle, right? Exactly. If we have a Taylor rule where we set the nominal interest rate, then the whole point of doing that is that there's not going to be money supply shocks like this that then shift the LM curve around. The whole point of this is to stabilize money demand shocks. The whole point of this is to stabilize money demand shocks and have the money market not influence ISLM, right?
So is the general case?
This would be the case where we have a money supply shock, right? So like the question asks, and the answer is coming here is that, well, wait a second. We also know that monetary policy now frequently is done by setting a short-term interest rate. So there aren't going to be money supply shocks in that sense, right? And furthermore, if we set the short-term interest rate, right, then there's not going to be an effect, right? There aren't, by definition, money supply shocks, and the whole point of doing this is to then stabilize money demand shocks. So M is endogenous, and it's not going to, changes in the money market don't affect the ISLM perspective, right? So the answer then that you give here is that we have a variation, Y come from IS shocks, sure, or maybe not systematic policy responses. I would call them like here. Let's see. Then interest rate shocks, which would shift the Young curve like this.
Yeah.
So in other words, what your answer, my statement was kind of sloppy and incorrect, and you corrected it. It should be monetary policy innovations.
Yeah.
Right? Right? But then we can give it a nod, and then it's correct. Right? So so my question wasn't precise enough. Right? So I added icing to your cake here, and you added icing to my cake. Yeah? So I like that. That's fantastic. And I'm going to put these pictures. Okay. Can you see this from over there? The angle is kind of. Do you want to move over for a minute, or you let me know? Yeah. So, okay. The second question here. There's strong evidence for long-run natural or neutral rate of output. So we didn't talk about this yesterday. So now I want this is kind of like the reason why understanding this ISLM framework is so important or so useful is that you've heard it before, and you've heard it before, and you probably hear it again. Is that now that you've done it a couple times, wait a second. Maybe I'm getting comfortable using this tool. I can try using this tool, on something that I'm not quite sure of, right? The good examples are tools that I'm familiar with. Like I'm really good. I think I've got a lot of experience with with teaching and talking to people in different languages and different cultures, and so I have a lot of fun doing this, and I can, adapt to different situations. I've never ridden or driven a motorcycle, motorbike, or a scooter before in my life. What I would not do is rent a motorbike and drive through Ho Chi Minh City. I would not do that. I don't feel comfortable enough, I don't have the experience enough to do that, right? So the idea is, you've ridden the ISLM motorbike a couple of times, right? So let's go, and drive the streets of Ho Chi Minh City, right, and see if we can navigate it. So we're thinking a little bit outside the box here. That's the whole point. All right, so a variable might adjust to restore equilibrium in the long run, right? Expect inflation, right? Changes in prices, right? Yeah, that's what we think of in the long run. So, when output exceeds potential of output, this puts pressure on prices, pushes up inflation, with increase perhaps in higher inflation expectations. Right? So with the Fisher equation, let's say I goes up, right, and we have pressure on prices, so, right, so it's not clear what happens to the real interest rate here. Right? And this is a specific model. Then I think this is this from the Blanchard textbook or the Sorensen-Wittensen textbook? And it's a textbook Phillips curve relationship is what we have here, right?
Yeah.
An ADAS, right?
Curve.
Sure, right? And that's sort of what we're going to look at. There's different ways to do that, and that's what we're looking at with the New Keynesian model is to have the New Keynesian Phillips curve, right? So you chose a Phillips curve relationship, super, right? Right. So the whole idea is that we're going to have y go back to yn, but with prices adjusted. All right. And then you look at B. So I had thought about doing this also just in an ISLM. All right, but you pointed out all the right pieces that we're going to need. So let's make this easy to adapt to. Okay, so if we start off in a situation. Zero. Let's say this is the natural level. Right, we start off in the natural level. Zero, and we're going to have some money demand function, real money demand. Our initial limit supply curve. Okay. So now we want to look at a prime with this being increase in government expenditures. All right, so we have the right, now we can think, so this is like the icing on the cake here. Let's see, right, we have a shift in Y. Y has gone up, so we know that money demand, right, has also shifted out. How much has it shifted out? Well, it shifted out so that with money supply and the price level constant, okay, so that's our now we have the inside, right, that you pointed out here. The price level is going to increase. Right, what happens if the price level increases? Well, that shows up here, right? An increase in the price level is the same intuitively as a decrease in money supply. Yeah? So, and how much is money supply going to decrease? Well, it's going to, or the real money supply, well, prices are going to adjust so that in the end, we're back in our natural rate of output. Right? We have this interest rate. Because when we go out here, well, wait a second, if output goes back to its initial level, this means the original money demand function is what we have. So we can now pin down graphically the increase in the price level. Right, so either the so this is right. He chose a particular Phillips curve to explain why prices adjust. Here, right, I didn't explain why prices adjusted. Yeah? So that's the ISLM by itself can't tell us that. Right? So my answer, I just I said, okay, I'm going to argue the price is adjusted. This is great. I didn't have to do the argument because you argued for me. And now I just look at what the consequences, how to restore equilibrium in ISLM, and what the consequence would be. Now we have change in distribution of GDP amongst its components. So if we look at, right, exactly, so this equation here, right? Let's, right, we've not talked about net exports yet, right, so let's assume that doesn't change. Do like you talked about it here. Right, so we have here your right, the shock from government expenditure, right, that's the LM that I had up there, and I just added this LM adjustment back to Y. Yeah? Okay. But so you argue that we have expansionary fiscal policy. You were a little more careful. Let's look at government expenditure. That's going to make my life easy. You're correct. It could actually be something more, and then the consequences are going to be more different, right? If the taxes go down, right, then consumption. So we're going to come back to these other components here because that might be interesting. Okay. So if in the long run, so prices went up, output returns to its potential level, so this output is unchanged. G has gone up, if we assume it's expansionary government expenditures, so it must be C and I that are adjusting. Now, if the interest rate has gone up, right, then it must be that investment has gone down. Yeah? If we assume, let's look at Y0 C0 I0 G0 is what we started with. Then assume G1 is greater than G0, so it's expansionary fiscal policy. Right? We showed the colors. C1 plus I1 plus G1. All right, so we have G1 is greater than G0 by assumption. All right, we figured out that Y1 is greater than Y0. All right, the interest rate has gone up. Right, so remember, we didn't have the full multiplier effect, taking ahead to question 4. Right? It was reduced. It was Y1 instead of Y all the way up here because the interest rate went down and investment went down. Investment 1 is less than investment 0. This is just assuming that investment is a function only of the interest rate. Look, the lecture, there's the possibility that I depends on Y. Right? And then so maybe there's the if I right, then it's not right, so Y went up, which would increase investment. Right? I went lowercase I went down, which would, or went up, which would decrease investment. Right, but you can think then here, we can figure out that investment still must have gone down. If we look then at consumption, C1, we have consumption as a function of Y minus T. Y went up, so consumption must have gone up. So Y went up, consumption went up, G went up, but y did not go up as much as it would have if interest rates would have stayed constant, which means that capital I investment must have gone down. Maybe us, but as y1 less than y, call it full multiplier, I must have gone down. All right, and then we get to y2 equals c2 plus I2 plus G2. Right, we have G2 is equal to G1 greater
Có
than
hại
G0.
nhiều quá chị ơi. Sắp không thấy đường nữa rồi.
Y2 is now equal to Y0, right? That's this adjustment, that's the consequence of this natural rate, right? The consequence of this price adjustment that you pointed out. And consumption, if consumption only depends on disposable income, well, that's also the same as it was initially. So C2 is equal to C0. And from that, we conclude that the change in investment is exactly equal to the negative of the change in government expenditure. So this in the long run, right, we increase government expenditures, output doesn't change, and all we've done is replace part of private investment with government expenditures. Right? So, okay, we just want to make the government a bigger part, a bigger portion of our economy. That's the only long-run consequence here. All right, and now I want to think a little bit harder, because you made me think harder. Right? Let's think about what happens if it was a tax cut. Yeah, a tax cut. All right, so let's add. So what if T1 is less than T0 and G constant? No? So y1 is equal to c1 plus I1 plus G constant. Right, y1 is greater than y0. All right, now for consumption, y has gone up and t has gone down. So consumption, right, has definitely gone up. But we also know, because the multiplier isn't as big as it otherwise would have been with constant interest rates, and interest rates went up, that investment must have went down. All right, so far, right, same sort of effect. Now let's look at the long run. So now we have y2 is unchanged, g is unchanged. So if we look at c, right, consumption, consumption 2 equals C of what, y0, the original y0, minus
T.
T1, right? And C0 is C of y0 minus T0. So they're only different in terms of the taxes.
Oh, so C2.
Taxes went down, so C2 must be higher than C0. And we conclude then that investment, well, so look at this, if compared to the original equilibrium, y is unchanged, g is unchanged, and c has gone up, then I must have gone down. And it goes down by exactly the amount that consumption has gone up permanently. All right, so I didn't think about this one. Really good, I like that. Yeah, I just thought of the government expenditure multiplier. We see that then we get a different distribution, right? So if it's right, if it goes through taxes, we have more consumption. Also, in the long run, with higher consumption, right? But at the cost of investment. So, if it's expansion of fiscal policy through government spending increases, then consumption
cho anh dễ xong
would be
cái
unchanged, and it's investment that gets pushed out.
không biết
Okay. Wait a second. You said that maybe consumption
That would be investment.
consumption is ambiguous,
Yeah.
right? I mean, what I did here, again, I made my life easier. We also talked about what if we have a consumption function that depends on the interest rate, right? Because we did talk about that, and that's certainly a good possibility. What would happen then? I think we can maybe figure that out. Just so you see, so when you do research, I've got a paper that I've been working on for a long time, and you send it into a journal, and the journal rejects you, you get rejected, you get rejected. So even me at my position, as long as I've been working, most of the responses that you get in everything that you do, same thing for me, is rejection. So just telling you to be determined with whatever you want to do, tough skin. Right? But I finally got a paper that said, well, we're not going to reject it, we want you to do some work. Right? And, this is all the stuff they've written, all the things, you need to do this, this is wrong, suggest this, do this. So that's what I was doing last night. I was working on that.
cho anh biết sai đang tính viết thầy cho viết cái nghĩa mình ngu rồi không biết người ta gì nữa trời quá kìa
Last year they couldn't give me this answer because I didn't have that consumption policy in there.
chị không sợ đâu
Right, so it's also a possibility that maybe consumption depends on the interest rate. Right, should be the real interest rate, if we take that seriously. Here, I'm just going to stick with the standard ISLM. We have then positive. But then, likely negative responses to interest rates. Right? Remember when interest rates get really, really high, 100% overnight interest rates. Wow, I want to reduce my consumption and take advantage of these really high interest rates so that my money can generate a lot of wealth for me. Yeah? What would we expect here in the long run? Right? Here, then maybe it's a little more ambiguous because it might be the case that interest rates go up, reducing consumption, the consumption function, by exactly the amount that it would go down by taxes. No, that can't be, because then consumption would be unchanged and investment would still go down because of the nominal interest rate. Right? It must be the case, since we have the interest rate gone up, the investment goes down. Right? That has to come out. So if we look at this in the long run, if y is unchanged and g is unchanged and I definitely went down, then it must be the case that consumption went up. So all this would tell us is that maybe the decrease in investment is a little bit lower, and the increase in consumption is also a little bit less than it would have been if there wasn't this dependence on the interest rate, right? But it must be the case with the function we've written here. Since y is constant in the long run, investment must have gone down, right? Which means that consumption has to have gone up. That's sort of a shift here in the distribution. Okay, wait a second. You know, this is all really entertaining, this is great, and lots of insight. I'm more of a finance person. You know? And I gotta do this macro course because it's part of the degree program. This is way too much. What you should see here is that there are lots of different options, right? I went through like, but what if we add this? What if we add this? What can we talk about the conclusions? There's lots of opportunity for depth and also different possibilities. You could have answered this question like I did, just with the G. You could have answered the question just with the T. You could have had the nuance to try to look at both, right? You could have just assumed that prices adjust, argued for it, and then gone with ISLM. You could have given a more theoretical explanation for why prices went up, like we did over here. So you kind of have two different answers, right? This was my answer. This is your answer, and it's different. So my answer is, of course, correct, right? Because
Yes.
No.
Yes.
no.
Agree.
I mean, I understand that it's like a logical fallacy, the appeal to authority.
ผมไม่รู้
My answer isn't better simply because I've got the weird letters in front of my name. Right? I like your answer. You pointed out some things that I didn't think of. Yeah? So certainly, if I'm grading it, and I am going to be grading exams, I would be very happy with this answer. Again, in that first lecture, the introduction to lecture 0, right? We don't have a finished body of conclusions. It's about a suite. It's about a way of thinking, right? And we know that our model here is wrong. So having the exact, one way of applying a wrong model to answer a question be a little odd, right? Another way, instead of using Google Maps to look at how long to go from one place to another, I can also pull up the Grab app. It also has a model in the map, and it might give me a little bit different answer, a little bit different route, right? Is Grab right and Google wrong, or the other way around? No, they're both different, they're both right. So we have like 3 different answers here in total, 4 maybe, or no, 5, 6. If we added those other things, they would all be correct. Yeah? And you can, one possibility, like in exams, always like a time situation. So I'm going to assume that it's just government expenditures that have gone up. It could also be tax expenditures, but I'm going to choose to look at this one. Okay, right? I didn't tell you what to do, right? So sure, you can make the assumption. Yeah.
Can I ask something?
Yes, please, please.
Yeah, I want to like there is some confusion to me about this thing. So when we raise the G,
Yeah.
the Y increase this amount, right?
Yeah.
But this is a short run.
Yeah.
So this the reason why you also have like this one because like we changed from Y0 to Y1. So this go up.
Not because it's short run, but simply because at this higher,
Yeah.
right, we have more transactions, higher demand for money.
Yeah. So and then in the long run, when the Y needs to go back to the equilibrium, like the natural output, so like the LM must shift to the left.
Right? Mhm.
Yeah. And why this move to this one, not just like this black line.
So the first thing that we notice then is
price.
Y goes back. So in terms of money demand, the money demand then must go back. And we have the shift out, one, and the shift back in the long run, right? Because we have also then here equals Y2L. Thanks, I didn't write that in there. Okay. Because we know in the long run we have the same output, the same number of transactions, right? So for our money demand, we just have the same number of purchases we need to cover. So our money demand function,
No, not that.
God, the one below, God. 2 points deduction on Professor Mayer's exam. I erased it. There's no evidence. Oh no, there's a video. There is evidence. Equals 1, 2. Yeah. So that's how we know we go out there. So then the point is, so I know now, in this long one, we'll go back to Y2.
Yeah.
I'm going to be at this point in ISLM. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. And so now, well, what must have happened on the money market? So now I go back over here, and I say, well, wait a second. I know I'm back on the money demand curve that I started with because I have the same level of transactions, same level of output that I started with. But I have this higher interest rate I2.
Yeah.
So I look at that point of intersection, and I conclude, I deduct, right? I determine, well, then it must be that this real money supply has shifted inward by exactly that amount.
Okay.
Oh,
So can you explain this part, like when LM shift to the left, what does it mean? Like the price go up?
yeah, so here we have an increase in the prices, which is because the central bank didn't change the money supply, but the increase in the prices is effectively the same thing. Right? If you think of, if you look at, let's say I have 90,000 dong, right, in my pocket. That's right 3 meals at the canteen. Right? If the
Yeah.
price goes up to 45 dong, right, well that's only 2 meals of money in my pocket. So it'd be the same thing as if the prices stayed at the 30,000 dong, but the money supply that I had went from 90 down to 60. In that case, I would also only have 2 meals at the canteen and money in my pocket. Right? So for me, right, it doesn't matter whether it's the price goes up to 45,000 dong and I get to keep my 90,000 dong in my pocket. That's still only 2 meals that I can buy. Or if the central bank takes 30,000 dong from me, but the price of the canteen stays at the 30,000 dong price, I also only get 2 meals at the canteen. So that's why here, like that's how the effect of the increase in the price level, right, really works in the same as if the central bank had decreased the money supply. So it's a decrease in the real money supply here. And it's just, to make things consistent with the ISLM, right, that's the same thing that happened up here, is I work out the movements in ISLM first, and then trace back what must have happened in the money market. Right, so here, okay, I know that money supply goes up, is shifting the LM curve out, lowering the interest rate. Right, so I move this movement, and then I go back here, and I stop and think, so demand must have increased, money demand must have increased, and then I can just pick out this point of intersection. The money supply must have increased out to here with this increase in money demand to be consistent here. But if you notice, this shift, the size of this shift was arbitrary. I just made it up. I could have, and I just will, said it was this shift. In which case, fine. Then to be consistent, we must have had this shift in the money supply. Right? It's just about the consistency of the pictures, the graphs. The whole, that's why what you did at the beginning was exactly right in terms of the understanding the way things work. Because it, increase in the money supply, shifts the LM down, output goes up. Boom. This is just me adding the sprinkles to make it consistent. And it's kind of, Susan's done?
Yeah. Very clear to me now. And this part, like, when you asked about the change in the composition, it means like we're trying to understand like whether the aggregate demand change or not, like go up or down, and then only these components go up or down. Right?
Yeah. So the whole idea of what you see here is that it's easy to say, okay, I don't know. So here, I don't know why went up, and some other things change what went up, right?
Yeah.
Can we be more specific? Can we say exactly which of these components must have gone up and must have gone down?
Okay.
And it's somewhat easier in the long run because we know that in the long run, if we have this natural rate, that output has not changed. And this is interesting. This tells us that in the long run, a government policy won't change output completely, but if we have a permanent change in government policy and output doesn't change permanently, then something else must change.
Yeah.
So we're changing the distribution of the components of GDP. Right? And that's interesting, right? And this is how we see, you asked me before about crowding out, right? Where this comes to the English word, like, so I gave you the example, just, right, I'm in the club with my friends, and then this other group of people come, and then they push us up to the corner of the club. This crowd has come in and crowded us out of part of the space we had in the club. And that's what's happening here, right? In the long run, our club is the same size, and this G has come in and crowded us out. But who? Has the G crowded out the C or the I? Or both? And we determined that if it's the G that did the crowding, right? I gets crowded out. If it's T, taxes that we're doing the crowding, then we actually increase C, but again, crowd out investment. So this is, if we take this and all together, if we look at the combination, we can say that in the long run, with expansionary fiscal policy, right, maybe G goes up, maybe it stays the same, maybe it's somewhere between if we have a mixture, maybe C stays the same, or it goes up. But we know with certainty, according to this framework, if we have expansionary fiscal policy in the long run, this is going to reduce investment. This is, think about that. This is a robust conclusion that we have now that we look at from different angles. And now, take this home with you. You're talking now to, 10 years from now, you're at the regional government, right? Or you're the second in charge of the Vietnamese central bank, right? This is a pretty strong conclusion, right? If we have an increase in government expenditure in the long run, all this is going to do is push out private investment in the country. Do we want that? Maybe, maybe not. Right? There's maybe good reasons to have more G, right, and less I, right? Or more C and less I. Right? There might be very good reasons for it, but it seems like a very right? Strong conclusion, right? Robust conclusion. Right? That's the whole idea to get out of this.
Can I guess, like, what do you mean by writing this? Like, this is the new government change?
So here, then she pointed out that, I was a little sloppy when I just looked at a government expenditure increase. Expansionary fiscal policy could also be brought about if we hold government expenditures constant, that's why I put the line above it, but instead lower taxes. That's also expansionary fiscal policy.
Lower taxes, I thought like we have to increase taxes that we can have money to spend.
Yes, so expansionary fiscal policy would be to expand the economy, right? Either the government spends more or the government reduces its tax collection. Yeah? So, right, so we have she has the right expansionary fiscal policy means.
But I thought like, if the government want to spend more, like they have to have more tax from the citizens.
Well, no, so what we see here, investment goes down in the long run. And now you can answer your own question. So if they're not they increase G in the long run, but not increase taxes, how are they paying for this? If we decrease taxes but don't decrease government expenditures, how are we paying for this tax cut? We're paying for it, right? The government pays for it by going to financial markets and borrowing it. And to sustain this permanently higher deficit, right, the government is always borrowing, which we have someone else in the market always borrowing, driving up interest rates. And what's the consequence? Financial markets, it's not just private investment borrowing to finance factories. We always have this chunk of government that we have to finance, which is why G is crowding out capital I.
Can I ask one last thing?
Sure.
It's like, I asked ChatGPT and I think it's kind of brilliant with the answer, like, how can they finance their government more like government spending? They say there are two scenarios, debt financing and also like from tax. From like they have to raise tax so that they can have more money to use, so that is a thing, and that affect the consumption. But in the case of debt financing, like they say that if they use that way and the Ricardian equivalents apply there, so the citizen also think ahead of time, so they smoothen their consumption path already, so they don't even change in.
So now stop. Now this is what we need. This is why. So ChatGPT doesn't know we're building to something. We have this consumption function that's just a rule. We haven't thought about, well, what happens if consumers see through this if they're optimizing. We have to figure out how an optimizing household might behave, in which case it might fulfill Ricardian equivalence, like we see, wait a second, I'm getting a tax break from the government that isn't financed. I'm just going to take this tax break and save it, reducing my consumption. We're not there yet. No? We can think about coming there. That's exactly why I pulled this out. That's interesting. I was just see what ChatGPT say. Like, did you give it exactly? Like, did you copy and paste like exactly the question in here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it's maybe we can ask it. Stay within the ISLM framework.
Okay.
Right? If it just stays within the ISLM framework, what its answer would be then? Right? So see, because I mean the ChatGPT is it's going to draw like on right, it draws on like all of Wikipedia and more, of course, but it's never going to give you. It's not. There's no intelligence. Right. But what is you've done econometrics, so you know what it is. ChatGPT is just nonlinear least squares. That's all it is. It's just nonlinear least squares. And it's doing this with large database with lots of words and letters, right? And we have some very powerful learning how to using this entire corpus like of internet, and we have forcing to solve this problem. We have stochastic gradient descent, which is how it finds this optimal solution of nonlinear least squares, right? You know, auto diff to work through this, but it's just statistical model. All it gives you is the most likely string of words that matches the text that you put into it. So it's not actually understood or given an answer, right? It's looking, given all all of Wikipedia, which sequence of words is most likely going to match this sequence of words, right? Right. Again, not to say that's not a very useful resource, but.
我就話佢會講嘅手嚟。
Con take background, take a background.
ambiguous luôn á, con ambiguous.
Professor, can we take like 10-minute break before we go on and maybe 3 minutes forward?
Sure.
Yeah.